Good morning. This open meeting of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full names for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town reserves the right to remove any member of the public who doesn't use a full name or who acts inappropriately. I am Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. As a preliminary matter, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Peter Brace.
Aye.
Ian Golding.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Fritz McClure.
Here.
And if we have additional members joining us, I will note that. Sarah Boyce will be joining us momentarily. I'll come back to her. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Vince Murphy.
Here.
And we do not have people present who are anticipated speakers on the agenda. I'll return to that agenda topic after the script is read. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is convening via video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to share the screen of your computer or device. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all phones and devices during the meeting if you're not speaking. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. All supporting materials have been provided. Members of this body are on the town's website unless otherwise noted. Before we turn to the first item on the agenda, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the list of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in an accurate way. I'm going to butcher the sentence that says to speak clearly. All right, and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public who have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. If you're not able to participate in the remote meeting, you may also submit comments to the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Vince Murphy, to be read into the meeting record. His email is vmurphy@nantucket-ma.gov. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. For public comment, we're using the raise hand feature in Zoom. If we do not recognize you, you can also send a chat message to me or to Vince, letting us know that you have a comment. Please do not submit comments through the chat. We are not equipped to capture them in that way. Sarah, good morning. Just doing a sound check for you.
Here.
Okay. So just a note for the agenda before we get started. I misunderstood the commitment from the Yacht Club. They were not able to appear today. We will have them request that they appear at a later meeting. So that item will not be covered on the agenda today, and my apologies for getting that wrong. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for September 14th. Those minutes are not complete. We're waiting for some supplemental materials. For September 28th, Vince, can you put those up on the screen?
Thank you, Mary. Just a couple of minor amendments. I added Holly Backus, who was present. I added the YouTube link and one or two minor spelling corrections.
Thank you, Vince. Any comments or corrections to the minutes from members of the committee? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Ian. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, I got to get my roll call vote sheet. I covered it with sections of the CRP. So roll call vote in alphabetical order. Gary Beller. Gary, you're on mute. Gary, are you able to hear us? You might be frozen. I'm not getting a response from Gary. Sarah Boyce?
Approve.
Peter Brace?
Aye.
Ian Golding?
Aye.
Fritz McClure?
Aye.
And Mary Longacre, aye. The minutes of September 28th are approved. We also have the minutes from October 5th. Vince is getting those up on the screen. Did we have any comments or questions about those minutes?
Yeah, I had one or two. No, so October 5th, wasn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
And thank you, as always, to Fritz for providing the minutes for the committee.
Share these to the screen. Yeah, there was just added their YouTube recording. I don't. Hopefully people can see this, and I think that was about all I did. Oh, and I put in the email below. I sent this to committee members initially, then put in a note in here for the email from Bruce Mandel, and that's copied and pasted below now, which it wasn't before. And I resent this, I think, Friday to committee members.
Thank you, Vince. Sarah, you're on mute.
Sorry, my mute button was hidden. I just had a comment on something I said on the minutes. So not the first time my name is mentioned, but further down. Thanks. So right at the bottom, yeah, right there where the cursor is. So, I mean, I know that the recording is available to see where we all elaborate, but I feel like I want to amend that statement because it's not quite the sentiment I was saying. Like, I actually don't think we should have a top 5 tasks. So not that it's not an easy task, I mean, which is true, but also that I disagree with having a top 5. Was more my sentiment.
How would you like it worded, Sarah?
So you can keep what's on there, or well, let me think, sorry. I would say something like that the priority list that Arcadis put in the report, in the plan, like we should go with that. No, sorry. I haven't drank enough coffee yet today. That's fine.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep. Thanks.
Any
Deb.
other comments for the minutes? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Vince.
Excuse me.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. Roll call vote. Gary, these are the minutes of October 5th. We did approve the minutes of September 28th, and thank you for rejoining us. So Gary Beller,
Yes, I approve.
Sarah Boyce,
Approve.
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Fritz McClure,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Those minutes are approved. So Vince, now we want to put up the report for the annual report for the last fiscal year from the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee to the town. So the situation here, the text has not changed since our last meeting. So this is the same text that was present before. We have not yet been able to get the information to create the graphic. And certainly Arcadis has been busy the last 2 weeks. So we're really expecting that. But I wanted to ask the membership today if they wanted to approve the text of the report so that we did not have a last minute situation since this is due November 1st, and also authorize creation and inclusion of the graphic, although it has not been done yet. It is at your pleasure if we want to go ahead and approve this so that we can have something to submit without having to come back and discuss it again. So also, if there are any other comments or questions in the interim that have come up, happy to have a discussion of the text itself.
Mary, is Erica going to be happy? Usually these reports are supposed to be 1 page without graphics. So Erica might not be so happy to see all of this stuff coming through. Anyway.
Well, in our defense, we've had a very busy year, Gary. I did review the reports in the last annual town meeting. There are several that are more than a page. So hopefully we will be granted some leeway.
Okay.
And you know, I don't want to self-edit. If this is what we want to say, I want to submit it. And if we get edited, so be it. Any other comments?
I'll make a motion to approve pending a new graphic.
All right, do we have a second?
Second that motion, Fritz.
Thank you, Fritz. Is there any further discussion? So roll call vote to approve this as our annual report, pending the creation of the graphic, if possible, to go with it. Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
I'm
Peter Brace,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Fritz McClure,
Aye.
and Mary Longacre, aye. Thank you all. So the next item 5 on the agenda, that is the item that we are passing on. And then after that, so updates on related and concurrent coastal resilience projects. Vince, anything on Baxter Road that you wanted to report?
So I would take it that most people have seen what's happened within the last 10 days. The draft version came out October 1st, believe it or not, just that recently, even though it seems like longer ago. Then a few days later, the following, was it Wednesday, I think, there was a decision reached by the, or is it a decision or a path forward, is probably better to say. A path forward was reached by the select board, and that looks to be a new, you say, partnership or agreement to work with SBPF on a new path forward. It's about as succinctly as I can put it. I'm happy to have people correct how I put that by all means. But yeah, so the common period for, so that, and last Wednesday night at Select Board, they also discussed the draft report that had been received the previous week, the previous Friday, the 1st. There was a significant amount of public comment. A lot of people had a lot to say about the chosen path forward and the content of the report. And it wasn't necessarily one of the options, but that was presented in the report, I think, is a polite and fair way of putting it. The comment period was extended. It closes on Baxter Road. Now I'm talking about the comment period on Baxter Road was extended for a week from that meeting. I've gotten, I think, only one response so far. The comment period closes tomorrow, Wednesday, the 13th of October. If there's anyone that wants to put in comments on it, by all means, please send them along in any written format, and I can send them directly to the Baxter Road project team.
Thank you, Vince. Any other comments or questions on Baxter Road before we move on? Okay, Vince, anything on the Sheep Pond Road project?
No developments in the last few months.
Thank you. And Jen is not here, so I don't think we have anybody to speak to the trustees of reservations and Nantucket Conservation Foundation project. So the next topic on our agenda is, are there any other resilience projects that anyone else has any information about that they wanted to share? Just pause for that. I don't see anything. Okay. Continued discussion of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee letter for the Coastal Resilience Plan. So this is just an opportunity, if you've had any thoughts about what might go in that letter, to provide those and have a discussion. I'm not anticipating, or I haven't prepared anything. As we noted, we would be able to wait for the final plan to be released before we had to draft a letter. So I just wanted to offer the opportunity. Gary? Yes.
Let me start off by saying that I had an epiphany this weekend following a conversation I had with Vince, who I happened to see and chat with at the Scallop Ball. And I'd like to share my epiphany with
Please.
you and with all of my fellow members of the committee. In fact, I made some notes about it, and I'll go through my notes when I get up at 3 o'clock. That's the answer. First, when I start, I'd like to remind you all of two cliches both of which I am sure all of you already know, and also represent the challenges which we face in the implementation of the Coastal Resiliency Plan. The first cliche is, cannot see the forest for the trees. Meaning, of course, that a person or an organization cannot see the big picture because the focus is too much on the details. Or another way of saying that is, it's an expression used of someone who is too involved in the details of a problem to look at the situation as a whole. That's the first cliche. Second cliche is, where you stand is where you sit. That means, of course, your view of the situation shaped by your personal relationship to it. Where you stand is your ideals, your influences, and your situation. And where you sit refers to your opinion on a matter based on where you are standing. So enough of these cliches, you've heard of them. As you all have heard me say at prior meetings of this committee, my concern has been with the difficulty our town will face in selecting priorities for actions recommended by the Coastal Resiliency Plan about to be finalized. And my suggestion is that this is an opportunity for CRAC to step up and take a leadership role. In fact, I don't merely think it's an opportunity for us to do so. I think it's an obligation for us to do so. So what does this lead me to? And CRAC's role? So let me tell you what I think. It's not about Baxter Road, and it's not about the Massasoit Bridge. It's about our infrastructure. What we should be doing and what we must do is to get the town to focus, especially initially, on the threats to our infrastructure, our water and sewage facilities, our ferry terminals, wharves, and the like, our electricity delivery systems, our airports, and our roads. As we've heard at prior meetings, individuals in several of our communities or locations will seek priority status for their local issues. Many are probably on this call today. But as I see it, CRAC's job is twofold. First, to oversee the completion and production of Nantucket's Coastal Resilience Plan, a task which is about to be completed. And second, provide leadership in the implementation of the steps called for in the plan, which are designed to protect and preserve the entire island, not one community, not one area. And so I again focus on infrastructure, because if we don't do that, to whom will that task fall? So what's the common need that infrastructure strengthening and remediation require? Two things come to my mind: funding and sand. Now, members of this committee have in previous meetings identified the importance of these issues in dealing with the CRP implementation. I agree with them. And in my opinion, the town should initially apply laser-like focus on those two needs. And of course, they are related and vital to the protection of our infrastructure, as well as the numerous local projects around the island that eventually will have to be undertaken. How we can maximize the funding opportunities that may be available and satisfy our enormous requirements for obtaining and delivering the sand needed in numerous sites should be our highest priority and focus for the town's response to the CRP. If committee members agree, perhaps some of these thoughts ought to be included in CRAC's cover letter to the plan. That's my epiphany. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And if you have those notes and want to send them off to me, that would be helpful.
I'll do that.
Ian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you, Gary. I think that's a great help and a very good suggestion and succinctly put. So.
Thank you.
And I might add, Joanna, I love the fact you're having breakfast. I muted my screen so I could eat mine. Anyway, thank you.
It's a busy day that starts very early.
Okay, further comments or questions? Vince?
Just a related type of comment. I've obviously sent the request off to Libby to ask her to draft something for the town admin part that they're going to do. And as came up at this meeting, the previous meeting, the committee members were saying about how climate change should be part of the focus, and that I've made that suggestion.
Thank you, Vince. Joanna and then Sarah?
So the other question that I have is, and Vince, you alluded to this when I also ran into Vince over the weekend. He was very busy. The piece about the financial estimates of how much all this is going to cost. So I think you said, Vince, that they were going to be available in like a week and a half. And so how will we receive that? And how will it be integrated into the report? And how do we start to have conversation about that piece of it?
Fingers crossed. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Vince.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Yeah, fingers crossed I'll have it quite soon. Don't have a date or a day. I got to have a look at a draft, and is it unfair to say that parts of it were eye-watering? It's about as much as I can say at the moment. So I'm having one or two other staff members review it as well, just to see if it all checks out and if there's any issues with it. Once we send back our comments and our cadence deal with our internal issues, then hopefully I'll have a draft for the committee as soon as I can after that. You fingers crossed, get it. But is it too much to say before the weekend? Maybe next Monday or Tuesday? I don't know. But hopefully I'll have a good working draft for this committee to email to this committee before
our next meeting.
Well, no, before the final. Before you get to see it before it goes into the final draft.
Okay, fair enough.
So we're slightly off topic, but I think I need some clarification here. So we're expecting to receive a report separate from the delivery of the final draft on October 22nd?
No, it's just going to cover the financial part that people have been quite interested in. So it's just the information that would be in that chapter.
So are we receiving that, you're saying that by the 15th or by the 22nd?
No, the 22nd is the final deadline, and I'm hoping, I haven't put a real date in it because I don't have a real date of when I'll be able to distribute that to the committee so that everyone will see it ahead of the CRP.
So Vince, I'm sorry, I'm still not following you. So you're saying we're seeing something different from the CRP at a different time frame. We have another report to review. I'm not following the timeline here at all.
I'm sorry. I'm going to try and make this as clear as I can. We're still getting the final draft of the CRP on the 22nd. There's going to be financial information that I'm hoping to make available before the 22nd to send to this committee via email.
Right, that's what I wasn't expecting. I didn't have any knowledge that we were receiving something separate from the final report on the 22nd.
Yeah, well,
even though it would be included in it, I didn't know that we were going to have another review period.
No, it's nothing to review. It's just to kind of an FYI.
But this is the place where I'm confused too, Mary, right? So if there's a financial element to the report, I'm confused as to why this group doesn't get to review and discuss it. Right.
Well, if we want to discuss it, it'll add another time period to the delivery, and we're rapidly running out of time.
Right, but this is a critical element of what we're doing.
No, not necessarily. These are planning figures. They don't mean anything in real dollar terms at all. They're guides.
All right, so why don't we go to Sarah and we can continue this discussion, but do you have something specific to this, Sarah?
Yeah, so I was waiting for my turn to talk after Joanna, but it relates to what's being said now about the finances, which is piggybacking on Gary's epiphany and what we've all said, all of our comments about the CRP, I was thinking that we might get into nitty gritty. Like every meeting we've had, I thought we'd get into nitty gritty about the details. All of us are concerned about the same thing. All of our comments have been about what are the next steps and how is this committee going to be used. And I feel like we've gotten sort of vague, like, yes, we can help make suggestions and help move things forward. But I just want to reiterate, like, I am very concerned that we haven't had a meeting with the select board. And I know that there's representatives on this committee, but I'm really concerned that we're going to have this plan. All of us care about it. All these people have commented on it. And then the departments that write grants will write grants about whatever they want, which has happened in the past. And the pet project thing, as Gary was just saying, we've seen it again and again. A lot of us have offered to help with grant writing because we have experience in that. No one has taken us up on it. And I just really think that for those of us who've been part of the nitty gritty, I feel like there needs to be, I would appreciate a discussion with that group. So I know that that's Vince's job and he has a seat at that table, but I really feel like this committee as a whole committee needs to be able to discuss, because I think yes, we're not the elected select board officials, but I think that this is going to dictate our community moving forward in the near and long term. And I think that those of us who've been mired in it, if you will, really need to help represent the plan. And I just want to put that out there as once again, a concern. And maybe, not just meeting with one person, not just, having one representative, but at this point, we need to have a big sit down. It can be a closed door meeting or whatever, where we've talked with the select board and Libby, et cetera. But I don't see that in the plan, and it hasn't been scheduled, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're going to move forward, but I'd love to see like a concrete plan for that moving forward.
So two things. First, I was expecting no communication from Arcadis until October 22nd with the delivery of their final draft of the plan. And to find out that there may be additional information coming to us, which we need to dedicate time to review and potentially comment on. I didn't have time in my schedule for that. I had no idea that was coming. So I need clarification on what is expected of us in the next 2 weeks. Second comment is, when we get the final plan on or before the 22nd and we meet the following Tuesday, I will not be voting to adopt that plan on Tuesday. There simply will not have been enough time to absorb that. And I expect that even though it is a final draft, that we will have time to consider it and to form our response, including writing the letter that we're essentially talking about right now, before that goes with a recommendation to the select board. I'm anticipating that the second select board meeting called for in the contract will be the presentation of that final draft with our comments as regarding a recommendation. So Vince, if there's anything in that timeline that is surprising to you or that needs clarification, please let us know.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry I might have confused things, but just to make it as clear as I can at this point, the financial information I wanted to send it to CRAC members as an FYI, not for comment, because there won't really be room to comment after that. The figures are what they are. If you're going to comment on them after that you receive them, then why wouldn't we just put them straight into the CRP as they are? I'm kind of getting a bit confused myself. I don't mind saying. So I just wanted committee members, because there've been such interest in it, have something. So that's what I requested. And I've been trying to find a date that might happen. I don't know when.
Sarah, and then Joanna.
Yes, sort of piggybacking on what Mary was saying about wanting to know the timeline. I think that I know that the timeline has already been pushed from the expectation, but I think because of the importance of this plan and it being the first one, I think we need to give it the time it needs. I don't think that we want to rush anything. I think we want to have, the full ability to, as Mary was saying, read through everything, really absorb it before we're ready to fully adopt it. And so if new information is coming, I don't think, this is the kind of thing that I'm worried about, right? So that like, oh,
I'm
we
sorry,
have this
I have to
information
interrupt.
and the
You keep
committee
saying new
doesn't matter.
information. It's also going to be new information in the final draft. There's going to be a lot of updates in the final draft.
And
You're
that's,
trying to comment on the
Right,
final
and that's
draft
what
as
we're
well?
saying. Like, I
I'm
don't,
sorry.
all right, so time out, please. So Sarah, please finish your comments. Vince, you can respond. Let's not have a back and forth. Thank you.
thank you, Mary. The last bit I wanted to say was that I understand that there's going to be like continued updates with a living plan, but that we need to have that time to be able to absorb and adjust it or read and understand. And I think that I'm worried about this kind of like, oh, the committee doesn't have time to review it, so we're just gonna like, this is it. Because like the whole point of doing this for years is for us to, be part of the process. And I just feel like the process needs to be given the time it needs. And the deadline's arbitrary.
Thank you, Sarah. Go ahead, Vince. Yes.
Deadlines are interesting, and it's interesting you say arbitrary because they've overspent in some areas of their plan, and they're eating that themselves. That's them problem, but they're getting to the point where they're done. They'll have nothing else they'll be able to afford to do. So you can ask for more, you might not necessarily get more.
So I'm going to make a comment. I'm sorry, Joanne, I did say we'd go to you. So go ahead with your comments and then I'll come back.
Well, I agree with Sarah. And also, I have been saying for a long time about tying the financial piece to the plan, because it's very, very difficult to understand the impact of this entire thing without understanding the numbers. On top of that, we also have a situation where, federal funding and grants, there is no application process or necessarily grants that even exist for this type of thing as of yet, right? There's no federal permitting to do the kind of work in some of these scenarios that exists. We're operating and making recommendations that are outside of the pathways that exist to do this work because we are looking into the future. So really hard to do that without fully understanding what it's going to cost and what the path to that end is. So you can have a plan that has a bunch of these suggestions, but if we don't understand how we can get from point A to point B, or even understand that there's not a legitimate path from point A to point B, it's really difficult to make a recommendation to a community that is looking to us for leadership on an issue.
Thank you, Joanna. So I'm going to add my comments. I looked at the contract with Arcadis, and it's unfortunate, but there was some conflict in the final time. The draft was due 10 to 12 months after beginning work. And the contract also said it's expected to take a year after beginning. But then the contract also said it needs to be done in 12 months. So what we have is a situation where the draft was done at the 12-month mark where the contract was supposed to be finished. And it's unfortunate that that timing wasn't better worked out. There is also in the contract provision for a second review period, the possibility of a public meeting, the second presentation to the select board. So there is a lot of opportunity spelled out in the contract for continuing to review this document. At the same time, there is the question about the 12-month mark. And I'm of the opinion that agrees with Sarah that the choosing of 12 months was somewhat arbitrary. And it's more important to get the highest quality document that we can get, because this is going to be foundational for many decisions going forward, than to worry about a number of weeks in the process. I understand that there might be consequences to pushing for another week or 2 or 3 or whatever the amount needs to be, because there are other schedules that we are trying to mesh with, like town meeting. But I think that we can work around that potential for conflict. So, I'm committed to getting the best document that we can get with the parameters that we have available, which are the contract, the willingness of Arcadis to work with us, and the ability of the town entities to move forward. Vince, did you have further comments or before we go to Peter?
No, you covered it. The willingness of Arcadis being the big part. The only thing I would add is that the contract also said only 5 meetings with CRAC. From memory and a brief count, they've met with CRAC 17 times. They have far exceeded that part of their contract and many other parts.
Thank you, Vince. Peter?
What are the consequences of going longer? I agree with both Joanna and Sarah. We're here to do the job. We're not going to get buy-in if we don't give it our all, and finances are such a huge part of it. So what are the consequences? We're talking about spending more money to take more time. And is there any way we can do that? Because this seems necessary to me.
Vince?
There's only one way that I can see it, and I'm kind of reluctant to take it. There was 27,500 left in a contingency budget, and that had been now changed by the committee's request to have that used for getting grant applications ready. That would have benefited us enormously. If you want to take that to be used for extending the time and then not doing grant applications, that will fall to me and many others without any assistance, and then we might not get projects off the ground nearly as quickly, just as an observation.
Vince, were there any further comments about how the delivery date of the plan would impact other operations in the town? I don't know if there are any, I'm just asking.
I don't know. I also just thought of something else. I'll come back to that, and I might have to ask you a bit more about that one, Mary. There was an extension granted to cover the timeline for using that contingency money for grant writing and grant preparation. That was kicked out to the end of January. So it would also have consequences to how that was rephrased per the extension. So that, they had specific points to it.
Okay, Peter, and then Sarah.
I would say we've got years and years and years of grants to write, and I'd say that none of them are going to mean that much unless we have the good basis of what we're writing the grants for. And if we don't solve the money issue, a little bit of uncomfortableness. I know more work for Vince, more work for other people, but this is our island we're trying to protect, and we also need to convince people that how to do this. I'm not saying that the way I want to say it, but yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Sarah?
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I think when I said deadlines are arbitrary, I was not, thinking, I just spoke without thinking, I guess I should say. Obviously, deadlines are important, but I think, as we're all saying, the most important thing is getting it right. And in terms of the deadline extension, I don't think we're talking about like a month here. I just think that with sudden new information, like a few days ostensibly before the final reports due, even with that, like in the contract, the year deadline, we need comment time. And I know that we've had time to comment on the plan so far, and I don't think anything has been, it's not like there were major revisions that we have from what we've discussed anyway. But I think the financial piece being so important, I think that is helpful to put that financial piece with the understanding of what the priorities are. So I know that we might not be able to change the financial piece. That's not what I expect for comments. It's more how that fits into the projects as proposed.
Vince?
So I'm so confused. I was trying to get something for this committee just so the committee members could see it a few days before the deadline Friday week. How does that change receiving it on Friday week and then being able to comment on it at that point? Because I didn't think there was going to be much that was left to comment on at that point. All the review process that have been gone through and then extended by a week they've been trying to incorporate those into the final plan, as well as the final figures that they'd always said they were going to. So how is getting something a few days before the deadline, new information when it was going to be new information on the 22nd anyway. I was trying to do what the committee was asking for, and this seems to have backfired on me enormously. So where was my point in doing it?
Well, Vince, I would kind of agree. It doesn't help to get some of the new information a few days ahead of all the rest of the new information. My personal preference would be to receive the final draft entirely on or by the 22nd, not in pieces. I wouldn't be spending any time reviewing the interim information because I would want the entire context. Joanna, you had a comment as well?
Yeah, I think that, some of this is, I'm going to liken this to, we as a group have spent this time almost like building a house together, but we didn't have a budget and we don't know how much all the parts cost. And now we're going to get to the house or to the plans of the house and the cost of it. And, we could be surprised, and we need to discuss it as a group and figure out how to best move forward, because really hard to do this work without the financial context. And I think it's really critical.
Thank you, Joanna. Vince?
If you don't mind me saying again, these are just planning figures. These are not going to be the real cost per project. It's just to get an idea. So then it also will be, it's just a huge number when you add everything up. And it's very hard to add it up because it's a cost per project is how it's probably going to be structured. Then when you try and understand the actual cost per project, you have to take the potential grants you might get for it into account to try and then understand what might be the end cost of the town. So when you don't know what the grant is going to be, or where the source might be, or the time stipulations that the grant might be able to pay for, or over what length of time, it's impossible to say how much this is going to cost. These are therefore planning figures.
I would just go back to saying I don't see any advantage to receiving them separately and a few days ahead of time. I'm sorry, Vince, if we gave you that impression. I certainly didn't intend to.
Right.
But I also don't think that it benefits Arcadis to have to produce that separately from the final plan. Can I get a sense of how the other members feel about receiving a separate communication a few days in advance with financial figures? Do people think that's helpful or not? Peter?
Well, if they're just planning figures, is Vince saying that these are estimates? They're just estimates, right? Because we don't really know what the final is going to be. If we're going to get the final plan, and eventually we'll have comments and other people will have comments. And it's not really what we're going to spend, but it's to give everybody an idea of what we're looking at so we can plan. That's great. Maybe I don't see really any reason to see them beforehand if we're going to see them eventually. And if they were solid figures, this is what it's going to cost, then maybe I'd want to know. But have it included in the plan. We see them. It gives everybody an idea of what we're in for. Have a statement somewhere that says just that. These are planning figures. This is to give us all a sense of what we're in for, and yeah.
Ian?
Well, I would hope, but I take Vince's point into account. In other words, it's complex when you factor in all the ultimate parts of how you actually start to pay to go forward. But I would expect these figures, estimates as they are, to be based on a factual analysis of how much sand was needed and, the estimated costs going forward. We've seen what the geotubes have cost because SPPF have provided a fairly exhaustive analysis at that level. So I agree with Mary that in terms of it arriving 3 days or 4 days before the report arrives, I won't be looking at it either. But I think as we've all said before, they're vital. It's vital to have this at a level that we can be sure of what we're discussing and what we're presenting as a group to the town going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Vince?
Yeah, just to, Ian is right in what he's saying. The way that the structure that I've seen it in, they've given, say, a cost per linear foot of sand for an area. And then they presented it in kind of two different ways, the construction cost and then the annual maintenance and operation. So they've taken that into account as well. but that's just kind of a separate one. And it's an estimated cost, not necessarily a real world cost. So something that's scalable, so that you could say, like what they did for Baxter Road, I think they did $50 per cubic yard. It'll be something along those lines to be consistent, as I understand it.
Gary?
I mean, I personally wouldn't mind if if they have the figures early, if they have these planning figures early. I wouldn't mind if they send them to us early, even though many of us might not even want to look at it until the final report is there. Some of us might look at them and say, you know, there's a couple of questions I have, just how they arrived at that. And rather than wait until the final report comes with the numbers, at least we could go back to them and say, you know, there's a little lack of clarity in how you compose those costs. So instead of just receiving it at the same time as the final report, and then it's too late to do anything about it, we might be able to get a little clarification if possible.
Thank you, Gary. Other thoughts on getting a separate communication from Arcadis in a few days in advance of the final plan? Helpful or not helpful?
Well,
Ian, go ahead.
sorry to belabor the point, but to Gary's point, would we actually have some input into the final report by getting the figures a few days earlier? And I guess I'm addressing Vince through you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Vince.
Not really much input, because it was just intended as an FYI ahead of time, and then it would just be in the version that will come out on the 22nd, and that just goes public.
Yeah, my assumption, and correct me please if I'm wrong, Vince, is that these will simply be order of magnitude. So they might say, you know, it's a 1 million to 5 million, or it's a 10 million to 15 million, or it's a 100 million to 120 million. And there isn't room to negotiate whether it should be a 99 million or 100 million project. That's a level of detail that's not appropriate at this time. But yeah.
At the moment, they're far more refined than that.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, and they've taken as much into account as we can imagine, that I could possibly imagine, and more. Everything from, say, a demolition cost, through to planning phase construction, through to construction cost, through to drainage during construction, you name it, they threw the kitchen sink at it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, this is part of my confusion. How do you deliver those numbers without delivering the rest of the plan to provide the context of what those numbers represent? That, you know, I really don't understand how you can deliver the numbers separately and in advance, and how it's useful to do so.
Okay, so I'm hearing just hold off until the 22nd. So that'd be a fairly general feel for the room.
Does anybody have a desire to have a separate communication with the numbers in it in advance of the final draft? Joanna?
I would like to see them in advance of the draft. I mean, I think we've looked at the draft, and I'm not sure if there's going to be any material changes, but the fact that this information could be pulled out, I'd like to take a look at it. And I'm also, you know, Vince, I'm wondering, I mean, obviously you've seen them, and are you confident in these numbers? And I understand sort of the difference between, you know, what you were saying and the specifics, but even just on the sand issue, we don't know the future of how sand can be farmed, or how it's going to be priced out, or if you can buy sand futures. I mean, we don't know the future of how this is going to be. So how are they figuring some of this? I mean, this is an enormous amount of sand.
So I want to offer one comment before we go to Vince. My expectation is that there will be substantial changes between the draft and the final, because of all the things we were told were purposely not delivered with the draft. Engineering drawings, you know, the draft is very high level. So again, that's my point, is I don't see that there's value in an intermediate step, because it needs the full context. Vince, please go ahead with a response to Joanna.
Thank you. Simply on the sand cost, it's like what I was trying to say to Ian, and what I said to Ian. It's a scalable number. so that you can then plug in a different number at the time of construction, which could be years from now. So they put in a number, same as what they did for Baxter Road, and then use that as something like you can scale the cost up and down from that. Not the amount of sand. They've got a pretty, well, I say hard to say clear, but they've got an idea of the amount of sand. They put in an idea for the amount for it will cost as a scalable number that you can move up and down from. That's why that's one of the few rounded numbers in this.
Fritz?
Not sure how to say this without being misunderstood. But I would just make the comment that if what we receive in the quote final draft, if we're anticipating that there are going to be a lot of changes because of the comments we've made on the past and things that need to be included and the financial numbers, that when we get that final report, we have the option of not accepting it immediately. In other words, it doesn't automatically go to the select board. So if we, and I'm not suggesting this, I don't want to, and I clearly, I don't want to sound threatening in any way. I'm simply making the point that if there were a drastic, if there was a major concern over what we get in the final report, and I'm not suggesting there is going to be, I'm just pointing out there is a, there is something. We could always simply say, we're not in a position to send this on to the select board. And then whatever falls out. It's like, now what do we, which presumably means now you have a discussion with Arcadis about additional time and additional money and whatever. But I mean, I hope that didn't come out wrong. But anyway, it certainly does not mean to be threatening in any way. It just, I'm just trying to make an observation.
Thank you, Fritz. And I agree. I think that was the same point that I was trying to make by saying I would not be prepared to rubber stamp the plan immediately after it's been delivered to us. That we should have an opportunity to discuss and reflect on it before we send it to the select board or back to Arcadis in that unlikely event that we felt that way. Gary?
If they have the numbers, I personally would prefer that they send them. And if I decide that they're not meaningful enough, then I just won't read them or I won't do anything about it. Or if I have some questions, I might ask it. But as long as we're not asking them to do extra work to produce these numbers earlier, and they have the numbers, so they can send it to us. Those of us that don't want to look at it don't have to look at it. Those of us that have an interest in that will look at it and say, well, maybe I should wait for the report before I say something. But I think there's no harm in getting the numbers early. I hate to be surprised at the same time, getting the report, which is being revised, and then getting the numbers for the first time.
Thank you, Gary. So I guess, Vince, we'll leave that up to you and Arcadis to decide what the best path forward is now that you've had an opportunity to hear different perspectives from the committee members.
Thank you.
Further comments, more specifically about the letter that we wanted to write and what to include in it, or if we need to continue this line, we can.
Madam Chair, I apologize, but if Gary and Joanna want these figures ahead of time, I am, as a fellow member, I would put my weight, insubstantial as it might be, I'm not talking about physical weight, to providing the figures in advance, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. If anyone has a motion that we want to create a resolution, we can do that, or we can leave it to Vince. Vince?
I had just made a request to turn it into a motion and then something that's voted on. I'm struggling to see the benefit in this. I thought that there had been a request on behalf of this committee to see it. I tried to work towards doing that. At this point, I'm sorely tempted to rescind my request and just leave it at that.
So for the members who are present, did anyone feel that they made a request prior to today for the financial numbers to be delivered separately in advance? I'm not seeing anybody claiming that. So perhaps a misunderstanding, Vince. I think Gary's point was if it's not extra work for Arcadis, and that's why I wanted to leave it up to you and Arcadis to determine whether or not it was something that would cause the process to cost more and take longer. Further comments? Okay. Where are we on our agenda? All right, so new business, any committee reports or reports from the Natural Resources Department on other topics of interest? Ian?
So the Conservation Commission has sent a request to the town manager and the select board for independent counsel going forward with regards to their order to remove the geotubes, and with the request that the answer be forthcoming as soon as it's practical.
Thank you, Ian. Other committee reports? Peter, I did watch the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board meeting of last week, I believe, and I appreciated the discussion there about the coastal resilience plan. Just recommend to anybody else who's interested. I found that meeting about an hour and a half to be worthwhile.
Yes. Well, I try and update them on whatever we're talking about. And you've seen on the agenda, obviously, that we've been talking about for a while, excessive sand in places around the harbor. So we're not just talking about shellfish, and we don't just talk about harbor issues when we don't have anybody before us or any new items. We just work on old issues. So that's something that we're working on.
Thank you, Peter. Any further committee reports or new business? If not, we can go to public comment. Are there any members of the public present that have a comment or question for the committee at this time?
Mary, I do. It's Deanne.
Thank you, Deanne. Go ahead.
Yes. Since sand is such a major component of the coastal resilience plan, it might benefit the committee to begin touching base with Nantucket's water community and fishing community. Offshore dredging is very, very difficult. It's fraught with a lot of issues. Everything that happens has impacts. Offshore dredging now is virtually unpermittable in Massachusetts. So I would just suggest that maybe you put this on your agenda and begin exploring this whole issue. So it's not only the cost of sand and the amount of sand, but it's the source of sand.
Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you.
Other public comments or questions? Doug Rose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add my voice to the text or the chat thread I mentioned earlier. I was doing this, high-fiving Gary Beller virtually about his epiphany. I think it made perfect sense. And I'm so glad that he brought up the idea of seeing a forest for the trees. It is so easy with 40 potential projects on a list of to-dos to lose sight of what this committee is uniquely positioned to do, which is to really look out for what's best for the entire island's infrastructure. Because to his point, if it's not for crack, who will call those priorities out? And so, not knowing what the price tags are for any of these things, I can only imagine they're all going to be very expensive. If crack can add its voice to encourage the select board and the town to prioritize those things that have the greatest island-wide impact. I think that would be very wise, because neighborhood by neighborhood, it's gonna be incredibly difficult to orchestrate and prioritize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Other comments from the public? RJ Turcott?
Thank you, Chair Longacre. I just wanted to mention, and I hope that committee members have a chance to read through the Land Council and Applied Coastal's joint comments. We were working late last night, and I think we got the comments into Vince at 10:30 p.m. last night. So totally understand if you haven't read them yet, but I really hope that you all have a chance to take a look at them. We sort of look at some of the lower hanging fruit for retreat. We look at a little more detailed discussion on what a settlement budget would look like, and some of the projects on the west end of the island too. So really hoping you guys have a chance to read through those. Thank you.
Thank you, RJ. And Vince, for clarification, are you forwarding those to the committee members?
I think I already circulated the comments this morning.
Okay.
Sorry, not to interrupt. Joanna is having issues staying in the room. Let's just keep in mind, make sure she doesn't get kicked out again or lose connection.
Thank you. Other comments from the public at this time? All right, seeing none, that is the conclusion of our agenda. There are some reminders, as always, on the agenda for resources, and if there are no other comments, we will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Gary. Do I have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Ian. Roll call vote, Gary Beller,
Aye.
Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Peter Brace, Matt Fee,
Aye.
Ian Golding,
Aye.
Fritz McClure,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Bye.
and Mary Longacre. Aye. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Stay safe, everybody.
I'm just going to stop the recording.